Hello and welcome to episode 91 of the Life in Recovery podcast with me, John Loxley. I hope you're doing well out there. This episode of the podcast is an actual podcast swap with Jersey Ed and the podfather of Friends in Recovery podcast. It was a really enjoyable conversation. I was guesting on their podcast, and Jersey Ed is going to be a guest on the Life in Recovery podcast at some point in the not so distant future. So I hope you enjoy listening to myself, Jersey Ed and the podfather as much as I enjoyed speaking with them.
Everybody, welcome to friendsinrecoverypodcast.com. I am the podfather, Mike Miles, here with my good friend, who I see 12 times a year, Jersey Ed.
What's up, guys? Jersey Ed here. At Podfather, we got a great guest today, John Loxley.
He's from across the pond, I hear.
From across the pond, yes.
That's
We're going
right.
to bring him on in a minute, but you know us, we have to do our mindless banter here for what reason, I don't know, but we always do it. But I just want to make sure that everybody has a phone number for us, 617-379-1163, or email us at help@friendsinrecoverypodcast.com. And Podfather, how you been? I just want to get that out of the way, make sure our fans have that, because they send me millions of emails about the shirtless Podfather, about the young Podfather. There you go. Mm-hmm. The Podfather. They all they're asking for dates about you. They're all cool.
Yeah, the Podfather's a hot commodity, no doubt about it.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
But staying busy, doing a lot of work. Got a lot of stuff going on.
Good.
Just all good stuff. I get a couple of emails every morning. I'm not sure if you're on one of the his list. Mike C from Genesis. He sends out a plethora of messages every morning, all positive stuff. He got out of Genesis about a month now, so he's been sober quite a bit, and he comes to see me once a week. And
cool.
I'll tell you, great guy. He's doing really good, and I love getting positive messages at 6:37 in the morning, because it just shows me, number one, somebody's maintaining sobriety, and number two, they're really getting a lot out of it. And great guy. So
absolutely, yeah. So give a shout out to John C. John, thanks for listening. Thanks for thanks for kind of coming into our community. Also, guys, just don't forget to send us your sober dates. I'm still waiting on a few of those. I'll start those next month, Podfather, when we collect a bunch of sober dates.
Right.
Just send me an email, help@friendsinrecoverypodcast.com, with your name and your last name initial and your sobriety date, and we'll give a shout out on the air. So
sounds good.
Yeah. So Podfather, we have a good guest today, John
Loxley. Yep.
John Loxley. You know him quite well. I think
I do, actually.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. John is a certified life coach, author, and host of the Life in Recovery podcast. As a DJ and music producer, he spent over 10 years drinking alcoholically and drug use before starting his recovery journey in 2010, following emotional breakdown. It goes on. John published 5 books. He's working on a 6th book now. He's been a counselor since 2004. And he continues to carry the message of the still suffering alcoholics and addicts, and sponsors and mentors. And as a life coach, works in partnership with men, both personally and professionally, to help them better themselves by achieving positive and life-affirming goals. John, that's quite a task that you're doing there, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
welcome, John.
So John came through us to another guest on our show, Dennis Berry, who was Podfather. You missed the show with Dennis, and
I wasn't on. That's right.
It was a great show, and Dennis, just being the kind soul that he is that you got to have this guy John on. He's great guy. So you got a lot to live up to here, John.
Thanks, Dennis.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Dennis. For putting him on the show with us. Oh, God. So, John, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know I skipped over some stuff on your on your bio here, but there's a lot of interesting stuff. You do a lot of stuff with trauma, mental health issues. Just get into what you hear, and maybe some of your a little bit of your story, and how you became an alcoholic and addict.
Cool. Well, so in terms of like where I'm at today, I started the Life in Recovery podcast a couple of years ago, with no kind of grand designs really. It was just kind of, I felt as though it'd be nice to hear some some kind of long form stories. So kind of each podcast that I do is usually somewhere between an hour and a half.
Wow. Okay.
And the guests tend to go deep into the story, and I ask a lot of questions, and and try and kind of add something to each podcast myself as well. And and it's kind of grown over the years into something which I'm really proud of now. It's really nice to kind of be getting the name out there, and to come on shows like yourselves, and just to be connecting with other people that are podcasting, like Dennis and Arlene Allen. I'm sure you're aware of her as well, the one That Chat podcast.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's so that's what I kind of do as a hobby really, aside from my day job. I'm a manager in a substance misuse organization. I manage the homeless team in Birmingham City Centre. So my team work with the homeless, and as it says on my bio, I've been in recovery for just over 10 years. And
congratulations.
Thank you very much. I think 4 or 5 years ago, I decided that I wanted to write a book, because I'd come to the conclusion that I didn't feel as though the spiritual malady, as it's talked about in the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book, I didn't feel as though that was necessarily unique to alcoholics and addicts. I feel as though the spiritual malady itself is basically, as it's described in the Big Book, is emotional issues, essentially, that become mental health issues. And people attempt to medicate those with substances and behaviors. And some people obviously become addicted to the substance or behavior. Whether alcoholism, addiction is something that isn't I was going to say the norm. I think what society is proving now for me is that addiction is kind of like the norm, really. Everybody seems to be addicted to something.
Yes.
And it's those underlying, that underlying spiritual malady that people are attempting to medicate. So I wrote this book called Addiction Prevention, and what the theory behind it was that if we were to introduce the 12-step program in schools to children at a young age, I genuinely believe that it could potentially mitigate addiction further down the line. So this was kind of where it all started, and then from there I wrote a few more books, and I've always been concerned with addiction and recovery. The last book that I wrote, which is called All Is One: The Science and Spirituality of Consciousness, is getting published, and that'll be published in May next year. So that was an achievement that I was really proud of. Yeah.
Well, you should be. And I like what you're saying. I can only imagine, though, in this day and age, and I'm sure over in Great Britain, well, I'm not sure, but it seems to me, I kind of read, I read a lot of newspapers, but it seems to me that society now, more so than ever, would really, if they saw the word God or even higher power, I think they would balk at that. But I agree with you. I've always said the steps for me have turned out to be a way of life. Obviously, I've been sober for a bit, but I read a book every day. It's called Jesus Calling, and it's basically right from passages from Psalms and passages from the Bible, but it's put into words, like, in other words, you're talking with Jesus. He's talking to us, I should say, but it's really lifted me up even to a better level as far as like the 12 steps. I love the steps. I have a step meeting every Tuesday night for the last 3 years. I facilitated. I really like it, but I really think my original point was society would give us a hard time if we try to implement any of that for a younger generation, because it would be so helpful just to plant the seed in someone's mind, because before they pick up that first joint, first drink or whatever the substance, maybe they'd have a conscious thought about it and say, you know what, maybe because my dad or my uncle or my mom is an alcoholic man, maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe, I better stay away from this, So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reason exactly what you've just said was where the idea came from, because my dad is in recovery and he's just celebrated his 30th year. So he got sober when I was 10, 11. And it was my dad giving me a copy of the Big Book when I was like 24, 25. He just gave me a copy of it and he just said, have a read of this. I was on holiday with my partner and still drinking, in full flight from reality.
Of course.
That's a good book to read when you're drinking.
I was sat on the beach and I had the Big Book in one hand.
That's unique.
Oops, spilled a little beer on that page.
And I was reading excerpts of the book to my partner. I was sat on the beach, like reading it to my partner, and my partner just said, "There's especially the bit, the Jekyll and Hyde character." I read that to her, and she said, "John," she said, "that is you to a T." She said, "Like, you're such a lovely guy when you're not drinking, and then as soon as you have a drink, you just turn into a monster." And it really hit there, but. I was like 24, 25. I didn't stop drinking for another 3 years, another 3 or 4 years. So the reason why I'm telling that story is because the seed was planted when my dad gave me that book, and it was attraction rather than promotion.
Sure. Yes.
My dad had turned around to me and said, "John, you're an alcoholic and you need to stop." I'd have given him that and I'd have, run in the opposite direction.
Sure.
I just thought that my dad had become religious, and I thought that he was weak. Fellowship.
Right.
And actually, like when I joined 12-step fellowships myself, a few years later, I realized that, it's a spiritual program and it's up to you, like what denomination, religion, spirituality, however you want to, whatever you want to do and however you want to work this program, that is down to you.
Don't you, Ed and John, don't you find it kind of amazing that literature was written back in the late 30s? And when you read I know when I'm doing a step meeting and other people are reading, I got about 12 to 14 people in my group. I go, wow, the insight they had even back then, even just to make it, you don't want to believe in God, we'll talk higher power. Because back in the 30s and 40s, I don't know if it was such a problem to mention the word God, but obviously they really took so much into consideration that just stands true today, that it's just for everybody. And it's an amazing, it really is. The 12 steps and 12 traditions in the Big Book itself is just an amazing read. It really is. It really is.
It is. It's an absolutely amazing. I think that from my understanding of it, from what, from reading through all the kind of old literature and also speaking to sponsors and, like the old elder statesmen, so to speak, my understanding of that was like, it was very much to do with Bill, because Bill didn't like the word God, and he much preferred like the idea of a spirit of the universe. And, I must admit that when I first came to recovery, I was similar to many, many people. Like the word God, put me off, it really did. Like I was lucky in the sense that I wasn't religious and I didn't really have any religious affiliation when I was younger, but I still was, I'd say I was agnostic, I wasn't atheist, but I was definitely agnostic. But it just worked for me, when my sponsor said to me, like, you choose your own higher power. If you can just admit that you're not all powerful, you're not the center of the universe, then you can make a start. And with that information, I was like, yeah, cool, and growing up, like, it's just the typical story really for me, in the sense that alcohol and drugs, I'll say alcohol first because alcohol came first, and it just gave me the courage really to just to be the kind of person that I thought I wanted to be, like basically it just increased my arrogance and my ego really.
That is true.
That's pretty much all that happened. And when I took ecstasy for the first time, that was kind of like the first spiritual experience that I'd ever had, because all my inhibitions were just disappeared, my ego evaporated. I loved everybody, that I came into contact with that night. And I just kind of said, I'm going to do this every single opportunity I get. And you know what? Everybody should do it. That's what I thought. Everybody should. And I did, and I did it for many, for a great, well, I say a great many years. It wasn't that many years for me. It was kind of like a 9-10 year period of drinking, drug taking. And then I hit my rock bottom age 28. I'm now 40. So, I hit my rock bottom and I, this is just my experience. I've told this story obviously many times in the past, but not on this podcast or forum. So the story is that basically my last drink was, I was leaving the country to go to live in Australia because I thought that all my problems were in the UK. So, get away from that.
Geographical cure.
Yeah.
I go all the way to the other side of the world, then I should be able to leave it behind.
Leave that shit behind.
So, and my dad said to me just before I left, he said, just remember, John, he said, you take your problems with you everywhere you go. And I was like, didn't understand what he meant by that. Anyway, I bought a couple of bottles of wine. We're having a dinner party. I bought I think I bought 4 bottles of wine for 4 of us, like everybody needs.
That's normal.
Polished off a couple of those bottles. And the last thing I remember was I was sat on the sofa on my own, and I had my headphones on. I was listening to old school rap music from my childhood, and I was just having a party for one. That was the situation, and it was like pure isolation, pure, just on my own. And my partner at the time gave me that look of like just total disappointment, fear, really, desperation, as if to say like, like, what are you doing? And I'd had that look so many times before. But the next morning when I woke up, I just remembered that look, and I blacked out. So I don't remember, like, that's the last memory I have of my last drink.
Wow.
And when I woke up the next day, I just knew that the game was over. And how many times do you hear people say that they just knew that it was over,
Right.
I overheard my partner saying to her sister in the bathroom that she was going to leave me if I didn't stop drinking. And that was my rock bottom. I walked back into the bedroom, and I got down on my knees. And this is another thing I've heard many, many people say. I just prayed to a higher power that I didn't even believe in. And I just said, I can't do this anymore. Please help me.
Right.
And I've never had a drink ever since that morning, so
amazing.
Something happened. And even though I didn't recognize until, because I actually didn't go into the fellowships for another year. So from that morning, I recognized that something had happened. And I heard many years later somebody say that that the war was over in their mind. And that was it for me. The best night's sleep I've ever had in my life that night.
John, amazing story. And I love what you're saying, because I can so relate.
I was 28 too when I got sober. What a great year. 28, you're either getting sober or you're fucking dying. I mean, let's be serious. Seriously. Right. I mean, that's about it. All the good ones like John Belushi, Janis Joplin, Chris Farley, they were all about 28 years old. Jimi Hendrix. I mean, all those poor guys died. And I guess we got blessed at 28 to be sober and not choose the path of death, because maybe somewhere in this crazy plan, God had a plan for us to do podcasts and blab about the recovery. I don't know why I have no idea why I was saved at 28. I really don't. But I could tell you this, John, I would not, number one, ever go back to it, number one. And I would never even want to think about it. I work very hard on my recovery. I work very hard with my sponsor, my steps. I listen to all kinds of podcasts. I eat, breathe, sleep, and shit recovery. I really do. And that's how I get by. Now, obviously I have a lot of balance in my life. I do a lot of different things, but just like you, I work in the field also. I commend you working on with the homeless. That's amazing, amazing thing. I got a dear friend of mine in Jersey that works at Eva's Village, that he works with the homeless too. That is a tough population, a lot of mental health, a lot of trauma going on there. So I really kind of congratulate you on the work that you do for the homeless. And that's one population that is kind of left out of all this. So how did you get into this? How'd you get into life coaching? How'd you get into, working with the homeless and writing books and studying with the I can't even pronounce what you studied under. If you want to say it's, I don't even know what you studied under, and I don't even know what it is. It's something Japanese.
What we're talking about?
Your Ren meaning love in, I don't know.
Renkoi. Renkoi.
Yeah.
Right.
You're doing a lot of stuff that I don't understand. Is what I'm
Ed
saying.
Ed didn't send me any of these notes, John. My daughter also studies Renkai. So, I would have been in there, but go ahead, John.
Well, the pseudonym Renkoi that I use for my books just came about because Ren means love in Japanese, and Koi is the symbol of courage. So I've kind of got tattoos, and I've got a couple of tattoos with those words on. So I used that as my pseudonym because when I first started writing books, I wanted to remain anonymous, obviously at the level of press, radio, and films. And it isn't until I started doing the podcast that I was kind of convinced to drop the pseudonym. Because people like Dennis, for example, said to me that you could probably help more people if you just be open about who you are. And I was kind of like, fair enough. So that's kind of where that came from. But how did I get into it all? I mean, from the point, as I said, where I had the kind of spiritual awakening, really, even before I came into the rooms. I then spent a year in Australia where my mental health and my emotional health went from being the best it's ever been whilst I was on the pink cloud to absolute rock bottom. So I hit that emotional rock bottom about 9 months into the year out in Australia, and I was desperate. I could only see two ways out, really. One was have a drink, and the other one was kill myself. And I chose the third option, which presented itself, which was go to a meeting. So I ended up going to my first 12-step meeting in London, where I was living by that time, and it was the best decision that I've ever made in my life. And, I haven't even spoken about drinking because what I've learned in recovery for me, as I said right at the very beginning, I think before we even started rolling, that the alcohol was just my medication. The alcohol was what I was using to medicate that underlying emotional and mental health issues. And since, like, the journey has been one of, like you just said, Ed, like I eat, breathe, and shit recovery, and I have done for many years, and that led me to initially start writing the books. Then I changed career first, so I went from being in sales to working in prisons as a drug and alcohol counsellor, and I worked there in London prisons for about 3 or 4 years. I then transferred to the Midlands and started working as a manager in the community, which is what I do now. And then a couple of years ago, I started the podcast, and then the life coaching. I've literally just become certified as a life coach. So when the pandemic hit, I thought, well, I've got a lot of time on my hands here, so I'm gonna basically do kind of like night school. And I did night school and learned to be a life coach. And I've just started taking on a few clients now. And the key, and I think something that I really did want to mention whilst when I had time was something that's massive for me that's just happened over the last couple of months. So my partner, who won't mind me saying this, she had a breakdown basically a couple of months ago. It was like a physical health issue that became a mental health issue, and then it turned into despair basically. And to cut a long story short, like I said to her, look, I've got recovery, I've got the 12-step program, I've got a support network. You need something similar. Like, you're going to have some support. And you know what? Within 24 hours, she'd found a fellowship that I'd never even heard of called Emotions Anonymous. Never heard of it. Yeah, wow. never heard of it. And it's a 12-step fellowship that's been around since the 70s. It was primarily in America, and now it's been over in the UK for quite a few years. And I've started going to the meetings myself because the transformation in her was so dramatic over like a 7 or 8 week period that I was like, shit, man, like I need to like up my game.
I gotta catch up to you.
Yeah, she's like some spiritual guru. And I was like, to be honest with you, Ed, and I just kind of, I was thinking to myself like, yes, I'm sober. Yes, I do service. Yes, I do a podcast. I do all these things, but I'm still a bit angry. I'm still a bit, all those kind of defects of character. They're not like boxed off,
Yeah.
And I've been thinking for quite some time that I kind of need to go a bit deeper with the steps. So anyway, I joined the fellowship myself.
Mhm.
And you know what? My level of awareness has increased massively over the last month since I've started going to these meetings. And just today, I got a sponsor in AA, and just today I completed steps 1, 2, and 3.
Mhm.
And that sounds crazy that I did it. I literally did steps 1, 2, and 3 in the space of a couple of hours. And what was amazing about it was it was a conversation over the phone with my sponsor, but it was such a powerful conversation because what he helped me to realize was, he said, you just think about all the times that you're trying to manage your emotions on your own willpower. And I was like, okay. And I thought, food, sex, shopping, exercise, work, all these things. All I'm trying to do is I'm trying to manage my own emotions.
Yeah.
And he's like, does it ever work for you? And I said, no. He said, in fact, does it cause you more pain? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, where are you going to get the power from in order to, to solve this problem? And it just took me right back to the program, to the book, a higher power that will solve your problem. And he just said to me, in that moment when you're struggling with your emotions, he said, say the serenity prayer, turn it over, have faith, and this will change. And I just needed to go back to basics. Like that's kind of where I'm at today, is going back to basics. I don't have all the answers, but I need to hand it over, turn it over.
Yeah. My sponsor always told me that if you have a question, look in the big book. If it's not there, you don't need to know. Just study what's in the big book. And the big book does, think about it, guys. Think about the chapters, the first 186 pages, all the stories. It addresses agnostics, it addresses the atheists, it addresses the wives. The answer to everything is in that book. It's just fucking amazing. You go through it and you read it. The steps are an answer to almost everything, and it's just amazing. So I understand the steps 1, 2, and 3 doing, you're a little bit deeper into recovery, so you understand it, but I get that is wonderful. That is wonderful. I'm sorry, Pop Father. Did you have
No, that's fine. I'm just saying the steps for me, 14 months into my recovery, panic attacks, anxiety just came out of nowhere. I'll tell you, I've been involved in some scary situations. John, I was a police officer for 35 years, but when I got sober, all of a sudden, 14 months into my sobriety, I'm having these panic attacks. And somebody at an AA meeting had told me to read steps 1, 2, and 3. And I didn't get into the steps till I was about 3 or 4 years sober, but I did start reading steps 1, 2, and 3 10, 15 times a day, because every time I got a panic attack, I felt like I was losing my mind. I didn't think the only way I can describe it is I felt like I was in the middle of a body of water where I couldn't see any shoreline, and I was treading water. So I'm alive, but I can only tread water so long. And then steps 1, 2, and 3 brought me out. So then 30 something years sober, I started working at a place, and they said, hey, you want to do a step meeting every Tuesday night? So 3 years now, I've been doing a step meeting every Tuesday night. And I got to tell you, that's where I get my release. That's where I'm so deep into it. And I can't believe that I've missed out. Even when I read it on my own, I don't get out of it what I get when I'm facilitating a meeting with people that are newly sober, and we discuss it. And to me, it's just a miracle. It's unreal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, especially like you hear, don't you? I've just gone through, just celebrated 10 years last year. So a lot of people, when they reach that kind of milestone, I think they just, and I was guilty of, I think I just thought, I know it all now, and you kind of take your foot off the gas a little bit, and you, maybe my ears were closing a little bit. I'm not sure. I don't know what was happening, but I knew I needed an injection of, spirituality, really.
Yeah, spirituality. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I just feel great from doing it. So yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad I kind of shared that. And and recovery for me, really, it is about change. It's about change. I love the. I don't know who said it, but change is the only true constant. I use that kind of saying all the time, because people that don't continually work on themselves and go deeper and change, they start to get stagnant, and even they might begin to atrophy. How many people do we know that have been around for years and years and then they pick up a drink. And this pandemic has been like, wow, it's been the great leveler, hasn't it? It's been horrendous for the amount of people that have had a drink.
You know, I really applaud Jersey Ed. We joke back and forth, but we were doing the podcast in a studio when we first started, and then we went to another studio, and it was a bit of it was stressful. I had to drive. We were doing 4 shows on one day, 4 podcasts on one day, changing shirts, going. It was crazy. But when the pandemic came up, COVID pandemic, we decided, hey, enough is enough. We're just going to do it. I'm in my office in Massachusetts. He's in his garage in Jersey, and here you are over in England. I mean, so we found a way to do it. And, this is the less stressful way, number one. But I really believe, I just read today, I was reading the New York paper today, and it was saying addiction and overdoses are up like 13% compared to last year. 13%. That's huge. We were just getting a hold of the opioid epidemic over here, and now it's gone back the other way.
Yeah. Well, doesn't that prove that? Sorry, I'm just going to say. Doesn't that prove that this problem is a societal problem? It isn't.
Absolutely.
That's what I was saying earlier. It's not just unique. Excuse me. So like when they say the alcoholic or they say the addict, well, I don't say that. I say that this is a human illness. This is the human, the spiritual malady is a human illness, and everybody to on a gradient to a greater or lesser degree is suffering, whether they pick up a drink and become addicted to alcohol, or whether they pick up heroin, or whether they become addicted to exercise or whatever. That's just a bit of a lottery. That might be based on your genetics. It might be based on your environmental situation. Who knows? The point is that the underlying problem is the spiritual problem. So therefore, there has to be a spiritual solution in my mind.
And I agree with that, because we spiritually get sick first. I mean, think about it. Even our growing up, Dennis had me doing a little exercise. He was helping me through something, and he wanted me to think back to my childhood. And I grew up in a shitty home. I mean, I have loving parents, but they grew up, they knew what to do. But my spirit was being broken way back when I was a kid. There was no spiritual. I'm Catholic. I went to church. I did all that good stuff. But the spirit was broken back then. And of course, if you have nothing spiritually inside of you, what are you going to do? You're going to turn to stuff that's gonna probably make me think that, okay, life is better with a line of cocaine. I grew up in the 80s, so it was cocaine, alcohol, and that was the big crack. I think I never got into that, but spiritually, I was looking to fill that hole, and drugs and alcohol did a good job filling it, but it fucked my life up big time. With everything else. So then everything else just becomes, just falls in line as needed. And then this program comes around and says, okay, well, you can get better. You don't have to take any drugs. All you have to do is just show up to meetings and work with a sponsor. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work for me. I need something now. I need, you got to give me a pill that's going to fix this shit, because I got a life to live. I got 4 kids. I can't be waiting around for this to get better. But you know what? 27 years later, life is, like Joe Walsh said, life's been good to me so far, and I cannot complain, man. I'm not dead. That's the main thing, and I'm sober. Did I have my ups and downs? Absolutely. I lost businesses in recovery. I had a couple wives in this recovery, a couple jobs, whatever it was, but here I am, man. I'm here. I'm doing a podcast. We have a wonderful guest, and life is good. I got a beautiful wife out there, great kids and great grandkids, and can't ask for anything more. The program bought that for me, guys. And anybody listening, if you think out there and you think this is all bullshit, everything that we're all talking about, just try it. Give it a shot for 30 days. See what happens. Go to a meeting for 30 days.
That's right.
And give it a shot, because you know what? This stuff came quickly to me. I understood the spiritual freedom almost immediately. I didn't grasp it, but I felt it. I got a glimpse of it. I got a taste of it. I'm like, this might be good for me. This might be good for me. So
I had some like incredible spiritual experiences as well in early recovery. Like, just through following the suggestions, like my mind was blown. Like it was things that I could not like explain, and you know, people don't often talk about that stuff a lot in the rooms, but you know, that is real. You know, like there's real spiritual power out there that you can tap into through this program. And I think another thing I wanted to mention, because you just mentioned it about your kids, love. You know, love was the topic of a meeting that I went to recently, and you know, through recovery, I've now got 2 stepchildren who I absolutely adore, and I never thought that I was capable of loving anybody else's children. You know, I just didn't. That wasn't an option on the table. I've got an absolutely amazing partner. As I said, she's now in recovery herself, and my daughter was born the week before the first lockdown in February 2020, and what an absolutely incredible, like experience it has been so far. I mean, I was so lucky because I was working from home for pretty much a year, you know, while she was, you know, in her first year. And it was the bond that I've got with her. She's called Alice, and the bond that I've got with Alice is like, it's incredible. And I'm just so like, and you know what, probably one of the most beautiful aspects of it is that my dad, who is now, as I said, 30 years sober, who by his own admittance, you know, he kind of abandoned me a little bit, even within, you know, he never left, but he was not there emotionally. You know, he's got such an amazing bond with her. And
isn't that great? Oh man,
increasing my bond with him as well. So it's this stuff is amazing. You know, recovery is like it's a life beyond your wildest dreams. My dreams
absolutely.
I wanted to be rich. I wanted to be famous. I wanted loads of money. And this is way beyond that, you know.
It certainly is. Yeah. I got a message this morning. My baby is 27, my youngest, and so we communicate every day, all 3 of my children, and they're all adults, you know. But she said, Mike Miles, you are a great man. And you know what? As long as she feels that way, that's gold to me. You know, someone had told me when I first got sober, I was 32 years old, and I had 1 child. No, I had 2 children. My son was 9 months old, and my oldest daughter was about 11. But someone had told me that the unconditional love you feel for your children is a different type of love than you feel for your partner. And isn't it true? And then if you experience to watch the birth of a child, I mean, if that's not a miracle, I don't know what is. And then the only thing, John, it goes by fast. So you know, pay attention to this boy. It goes by quick, man. It goes by so quick. You know,
he's already grown so much. But you know, you know how I said my partner's like become a spiritual guru. She said the other night. She said, well, because you just mentioned unconditional love, and she said, well, unconditional love for me is all about trust. And she said, like, I obviously trust my children 100%, and that is where unconditional love comes from. And she said, and do you know what? Because you stuck by me, because when she had the breakdown, and because of the fact that we've got a child together, and now she just 100% trusts me. She said, my love for you is also unconditional, and that is just amazing.
That's awesome.
And I feel the same way about her, you know.
Hey, what a great guest. Hey, Ed, make sure you get John's address and everything so we can send him over a couple things. And
absolutely.
Across
John,
the pond.
Across the pond. We'll ship it across the pond. John, real quick, how can everybody get a hold of you? Website, podcast, give them all that good information. I will also put it in the show notes, but you know, for the people who like to hear this stuff, you know, let's get it out to them.
Cool. Go to www.lifeinrecovery.co.uk, and that's for everything related to me, the podcast, the books, you name it. Thank you.
Buy his books, listen to his podcast, support what he's doing. John,
all my books are free. All my books are free.
Free.
Oh, your books are free.
Yeah.
So this is amazing. This is amazing.
Good God.
What a great guest, John. We say it all the time, but Ed does. He finds the best guest, and you were right up there in the top 3.
Absolutely. John, you have an amazing story. You have an amazing life. You know, I just want to recap on one thing that you said. I was looking for fame, fortune, and wealth, and I found recovery. And basically that's what you said. And this is what you got out of it. Look at this beautiful life. The thing that you said about your daughter, you could have said the pandemic sucked. I have a kid that got stuck in the house. I was stuck in a screaming baby. What this man said about the pandemic was that he bonded with his child. He was in his house for a year bonding with his child. I mean, that's just amazing. And you couldn't have done that without recovery. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, can you imagine not being a fucking maniac, drinking and a baby screaming? Shit.
No.
You're still a maniac now, sober. We listen to the baby scream, right? But no, seriously, it was, that is wonderful, man. I love hearing stuff like that. And that's what recovery is about, man. That's why you got sober, for that little girl, for that moment, for that year, for the rest of her life. Amazing story, John. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you, Podfather.
Thanks for listening, and if you've been affected by any of the issues discussed in the podcast, please see a range of mutual aid organisations in the show notes. Peace and love, and goodbye for now.